You screamed at your kid this morning over something so small you can't even remember what it was. And then you sat in your car afterward and cried until your hands stopped shaking. That moment, the one that made you wonder if you're becoming someone you don't recognize, has a name, and it is not a personality flaw. There's a version of this story I've heard so many times it stops surprising me, and yet every single time the woman telling it says the same thing. I've never told anyone this. They lower their voice, they look at the floor, and then they describe something that sounds terrifying from the inside. A wave of fury that seems to come from nowhere, completely disproportionate to whatever triggered it, and gone almost as quickly as it arrived. Replaced by guilt so thick they can barely breathe through it. This is perimenopause rage, and it is real. Neurologically, chemically, measurably real. And the fact that so few women have ever heard those words spoken out loud, in a doctor's office, by a partner, by anyone, is one of the quiet cruelties of how this transition gets handled. Let me tell you about Celeste. She was 49 years old, a landscape architect who designed public parks for a living, someone whose entire career was built around creating calm, beautiful spaces. She was known at work for her patience. Her colleagues called her the one who never loses it. Her teenage son once told a friend's parent that his mom was the least dramatic person he knew. She held on to that. It was part of who she thought she was. Then one Tuesday afternoon, she asked him to put his backpack away. He didn't. She asked again. He still didn't. And something happened inside her that she had no framework for. She didn't just raise her voice. She screamed. Not the kind of frustrated mom scream that dissipates in 20 seconds. A full, shaking, white-knuckle rage that frightened both of them. She threw a dish towel across the kitchen. He went to his room. She went to her car, locked the doors, and sat there, hyperventilating and weeping for 45 minutes. When she came to see me, the first thing she said was, "I think I'm losing my mind." She wasn't losing her mind. She was losing estrogen. And those two things are not the same, though her body was doing a convincing job of making it feel that way. Here's what most women are never told, and what makes me genuinely angry on their behalf, because they should be told this the moment they walk into any medical office and describe what Celeste described. Estrogen is not just a reproductive hormone. It is deeply, intimately involved in how your brain regulates emotion. Specifically, estrogen has a direct relationship with serotonin, the neurotransmitter that is largely responsible for your ability to feel stable, even, and in control of your reactions. When estrogen levels drop, serotonin activity in the brain drops with it. The brain's ability to put a brake on emotional responses gets weaker. The threshold between "this is annoying" and "I am about to come completely apart" narrows dramatically. Think of it this way. For most of your adult life, you've had a kind of emotional shock absorber built into your neurology. You didn't ask for it. You probably didn't even know it existed. It was just there, quietly doing its job, helping you regulate, helping you respond rather than react. Perimenopause starts quietly dismantling that system. Not all at once, not in a predictable pattern. Estrogen fluctuates wildly during the years before menopause, sometimes spiking, sometimes crashing, sometimes doing both within the same week. And every time it plunges, your brain's serotonin signaling plunges with it. That's not a metaphor. That is biochemistry. That is your brain operating under conditions it was never designed to handle without adequate hormonal support. And no amount of willpower, breathing exercises, or telling yourself to calm down changes the underlying chemistry. You cannot will your serotonin receptors into behaving. The brain is not a discipline problem. But wait, because that's not even the full picture. There's another layer that almost nobody talks about, and it's the one that explains why the rage doesn't just feel disproportionate, it feels alien. Progesterone, the other hormone in this equation. Progesterone has a calming effect on the brain because it enhances the activity of GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid, which is your brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. GABA is essentially the volume knob on your stress response. It turns things down. It smooths edges. It's why progesterone has historically been associated with feelings of calm, even mild sedation. Women with healthy progesterone levels describe a certain evenness, a capacity to let things go. Progesterone is often the first hormone to decline significantly in perimenopause, before the hot flashes, before the sleep disruption, before most women have any idea that anything hormonal is happening. Progesterone quietly slips away, and with it goes that GABA-enhancing buffer. The volume knob on your stress response starts creeping upward and upward and upward, without your permission, without any warning. So what happens when you remove the serotonin stabilizer and the GABA enhancer at the same time? You get a nervous system that is suddenly operating without its two most important emotional regulators. You get a brain that cannot modulate its own reactions the way it used to. You get an experience that women describe as feeling like someone else took over their body for a moment and then left them to deal with the wreckage. That is not weakness. That is not instability. That is not a sign that you are, quote unquote, too emotional or that you have some unresolved psychological issue that finally surfaced. That is your brain under duress from a hormonal withdrawal it was not warned about and was never given tools to manage. And here is what makes me genuinely furious. Women are being failed at this exact point in their lives over and over again. They walk into their doctor's office. They describe the rage, the emotional volatility, the frightening disconnect between stimulus and response. And far too often, they are handed an antidepressant prescription and sent home. Which is not the worst thing in the world. SSRIs can help with some perimenopausal symptoms. But it is also not the whole answer. Because if the root issue is hormonal, treating only the symptom without addressing what is driving it is like putting a bandage on a wound that needs stitches. Celeste had been on an antidepressant for 3 months when she came to see me. It took the edge off, she said, but it didn't fix it. I still feel like I'm one wrong thing away from detonating. That phrase stayed with me. One wrong thing away from detonating. Because that's exactly what an undersupported perimenopausal nervous system feels like from the inside. Like a pressure system with nowhere to release. Like a reaction that is constantly primed and waiting. The shame that comes after is its own kind of suffering. Celeste described lying awake that night, going through the incident frame by frame, the way you do when you can't forgive yourself for something. Her son had looked scared. That image wouldn't leave her. She apologized to him the next morning. He said it was fine, but she didn't feel fine. She felt like she had betrayed something, like she had cracked the container of who she believed herself to be, and now she couldn't figure out how to put it back together. I want to speak directly to that feeling for a moment, because I think it is one of the least addressed parts of this entire conversation. The guilt that follows these episodes is not just unpleasant, it is compounding. It creates a secondary layer of stress on top of the already dysregulated nervous system. The shame of the outburst feeds anxiety. The anxiety raises cortisol. Elevated cortisol further destabilizes the hormonal environment. And then, paradoxically, the guilt itself makes the next episode more likely. The system is trying to regulate itself and running out of tools to do it with. This is why I always tell women in this situation, the story you are telling yourself about who you are becoming is not accurate. The rage is a symptom, a dramatic, frightening, relationship-threatening symptom, but a symptom nonetheless. It is not your character finally showing its true colors. It is not suppressed resentment breaking through. It is not proof that you're secretly an angry person. It is your brain, under hormonal stress, firing responses it cannot modulate the way it normally would. The woman who screamed is the same woman who has spent decades being the steady one, the reliable one, the one who held things together. She didn't disappear, she's still there. She is just running on a system that has been chemically disrupted without her consent. Understanding that distinction matters. Not just emotionally, though it matters enormously emotionally. It matters practically, because it changes what you look for, and what you look for determines what kind of help you actually get. I've worked with women who spent years in therapy trying to understand why they were so angry. Years. Excavating childhood, examining relationships, doing real and important psychological work, and still coming home to episodes of rage that felt completely divorced from anything they'd uncovered in that room. Because the therapy was addressing psychology, and what also needed to be addressed was physiology. Both are real, both matter, but you cannot therapy your way out of a serotonin deficit caused by estrogen withdrawal. You cannot meditate your way to adequate GABA signaling when progesterone has dropped below functional levels. The biology needs to be part of the conversation. Now, and this is where things start to get more hopeful, so stay with me, there is also a significant amount that can be done to support the neurological environment even while the hormonal landscape is shifting. Sleep is not optional in this context. I know that sounds obvious, but I mean it in a very specific clinical way. Sleep deprivation, which is already common in perimenopause because of night sweats, anxiety, and disrupted sleep architecture, dramatically worsens emotional dysregulation. Studies have consistently shown that even partial sleep deprivation reduces the prefrontal cortex's ability to regulate amygdala responses. The prefrontal cortex is, in plain terms, the part of your brain that says, wait, let's think about this before we react. The amygdala is the part that says, threat, respond, now. When you're sleep deprived, the amygdala wins, every time. Protecting sleep in perimenopause is not self-indulgence. It is neurological triage. Magnesium. This is one of the minerals I talk about most in the context of perimenopausal mood, and for good reason. Magnesium plays a role in GABA receptor function, the same system that progesterone supports. When magnesium levels are adequate, the GABA system has the raw material it needs to function. When magnesium is low, which it frequently is because stress depletes it, and perimenopause is a chronically stressful state for the nervous system, the GABA buffer weakens further. Many women notice a real difference in emotional volatility when they address magnesium properly. Not a cure, not a replacement for the deeper hormonal work, but a meaningful support. There's something else I want to say here, something that I think about often when I see patients like Celeste. The rage itself is not always random. Sometimes it's the body's way of signaling that something in the life has genuinely reached its limit. Perimenopause has a way of making tolerable things intolerable. Things that you managed, suppressed, accommodated, or quietly endured for years, a dynamic that didn't feel right, a boundary that was never set, an exhaustion that was never acknowledged, can suddenly become impossible to contain. The hormonal dysregulation lowers the threshold. But sometimes the thing on the other side of the threshold was real, and sometimes the rage, as terrifying as it is, points towards something that was already there and needed attention. I've seen women in their late 40s finally leave relationships that had been quietly draining them for a decade, not because perimenopause made them reckless, but because it stripped away the hormonal buffer that had been helping them tolerate something unacceptable. That is not always a bad outcome, even when it is a painful one. I'm not saying that to justify the episodes. I'm saying it because some women, not all, but some, find that when they finally address the thing beneath the rage, the episodes lose some of their intensity. The hormonal work matters, and the life work matters. Both things can be true simultaneously. I want to be honest with you about something, because I think you deserve honesty more than you deserve reassurance. This does not resolve quickly for most women. The perimenopausal transition can last anywhere from 4 to 10 years. The hormonal fluctuations are not linear. There will be months that feel manageable and months that don't. The work is ongoing. But the difference between going through it without any understanding of what's happening, as Celeste did for the first year, and going through it with accurate information, proper support, and the right clinical guidance, That difference is enormous. It is the difference between feeling like you are losing yourself and understanding that you are navigating one of the most neurologically demanding transitions a woman's body goes through in her lifetime. That understanding changes everything, not because it makes the symptoms disappear, but because it removes the layer of terror. And terror, in a nervous system that is already operating at its limits, is something you cannot afford to carry if you don't have to. If you're watching this and recognizing yourself in any of what I've described, the disproportionate reactions, the guilt afterward, the fear that you're becoming someone else, I want you to know something. There are real evidence-based approaches to this, not just lifestyle recommendations, not just try to reduce stress, real clinical tools. I've taken the time to put something together that goes into considerably more depth on what these options actually look like and how to start having the right conversations with the right kind of practitioner. It's in the first link in the description and in the pinned comment. Take a look when you're ready. Celeste, by the way, is doing better. It didn't happen overnight, but once she understood the mechanism, once she stopped blaming her character and started addressing the neurology, something shifted. She started sleeping more intentionally. She worked with a practitioner who understood hormonal health. She had a conversation with her son that she said was one of the most honest conversations they'd ever had. She told him she was going through something biological, something real, and that the explosion in the kitchen had nothing to do with him and everything to do with what was happening inside her brain. He was 17. He listened. He understood more than she expected. "I thought I'd ruined something between us," she told me, "but the conversation actually made us closer. He started asking me questions, real questions, about women's health, about bodies, about things they definitely don't teach in school." There is something almost poetic about that, a moment that came from fear and shame ending in connection. That is what happens when we stop treating this as a character flaw and start treating it as what it is, a medical reality that deserves information, care, and an enormous amount of compassion. The women who are crying in their cars right now, and there are more of them than anyone acknowledges, are not falling apart. They are going through a transition that the medical system has historically underserved, undertreated, and oversimplified. They deserve better information, better clinical partnerships, better conversations with the people they love. You deserve better. And the fact that you're here, watching this, asking questions, trying to understand what is happening inside your own body, that is not weakness. That is the beginning of something. Most women I've met who are in the thick of this transition have spent more time apologizing for their symptoms than investigating them. That changes when you have the right information. Not overnight, but it changes. There is one more thing I want to leave you with before we close, because I think it matters more than most of the clinical information. The shame is a liar. The version of yourself that screamed and cried and fell apart, she was not showing you who you really are. She was showing you how much pressure she was under. She was showing you that she needed help and didn't know how to ask for it. She was showing you, in the only way the body sometimes knows how, that something real is happening and it cannot be managed alone. Listen to her. Get the information. Find the support. And please, stop carrying the guilt like it's yours to carry permanently. It isn't. If you found this helpful, I hope you'll subscribe to this channel and stay with us. There is so much more to cover: the sleep disruption, the brain fog, the way perimenopause rewires identity and relationships and sense of self. Every video we make is another piece of the picture. I want you to have the full picture, because you've spent long enough navigating this in the dark. The information I mentioned, the deeper look at what's actually available, clinically and practically, for women in this transition, is in the first link in the description below and in the pinned comment. I genuinely believe it could change how you approach the next conversation you have with your doctor. And that conversation matters more than most people realize. I'll see you in the next one.